Okay, so I'm glad to see whoever could make it here. I know that I was about to like run to the tailor and buy my kids holiday clothes. It's a very hard day to do anything other than run around doing errands. But it's always good to spend some time learning when we can. So one of the things I always think about during the time of the high holidays, Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, is how difficult it is to really do what the holiday wants us to do, which is to engage in this process of self-reflection and of growth and of change, and to try to find a way to move past the old year and move into the new year. This is something that's reflected in our prayers and in everything that we're doing, where we really are trying to push ourselves away from whatever was, tying us down in the past, not from the good things, but some of the negative behavior, and move into a different future. I thought that going into this, when Corona hit, I think every religious leader on the planet, and every human being, and every anybody who with a conscience, felt like, listen, if something hits the entire planet Earth simultaneously, right, and everybody on the entire globe is affected by something at the same time, won't it lead to a dramatic change for the good? I think most of us were hoping that it would lead to a dramatic change for the good. Now, I'm not saying that it didn't lead to dramatic change, and that, God willing, it will lead to dramatic change for the good. It's too early to tell. We're still living within this historical moment. It's really too soon to even know what it is we're experiencing. But I definitely feel that I've been noticing that instead of, the sense that we're now living in a time of opportunity and growth and the rise of maybe rationalism and and a turning towards introspection and self-reflection, what I see happening really everywhere I look is that there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, there's an enormous amount of distrust, a feeling that no one knows what tomorrow may bring, and that we're just sort of living at the edge of something. That's the number one feeling I've been sensing from the people around me, and now that I reflect on it, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know why. Right at the beginning, I thought everybody was suddenly going to become rational, and we're all going to just be good people from now on, and we're all going to take care of each other. That was probably a very irrational thought to have. Instead, in a time of great tragedy, in a time of great upheaval, some of the worst elements of what it means to be a human being do come to the surface.
What are you listening to, Chef?
Nothing, I'm just watching TikTok.
Oh.
And given that, we as Jews at this moment, I think, have a unique role to play, where we have to be doing whatever we can to try to figure out how to return ourselves to a place of rationality, of hope, of looking towards the good, of a transformation and a change for the better, because actually that is what our history has taught us. It's, this idea that everything can change in an instant, right? That one instant life looks one way, and in the next, nothing is what you thought it would be. Nothing is as you expected. The Jewish people are always in that mindset, I think, of knowing that reality could shift, that what is one day could be different the next. Now, many people use that phrase, anything could change in an instant, in a very negative way, where they feel like anything terrible could happen in an instant, right? We feel like we can't ever be too happy or too satisfied, because at any minute it might be ripped away from us. But the opposite has to be true simultaneously. Anything could change in an instant, also for the good, right? That one minute everything could look really, really terrible. You could be enslaved. You could be in the worst place in your life. And in another moment, we could transform that to the good. This on Rosh Hashana, our prayers really want us to focus in that way. And I think they want us to focus in a very positive way. So I like to say that our attention going into Rosh Hashanah, according to the Torah readings that we do, right, the emphasis of those Torah readings are exactly that what we should be feeling is that whatever negativity we're experiencing, whatever sadness or sorrow or feelings of despair or hopelessness we may be feeling, everything can change in an instant, right? So you're going to have Haggad. She has nowhere to, the first reading, she has nowhere to go. She has nowhere to live. She's wandering in the desert. Her son has nothing, is dying. And basically she gives up, she puts him under a tree. She walks away from the situation, which I think most of us do when things get really tough. We try to figure out a way to walk away. And in that moment, just when she thinks everything is over, she she has this heavenly vision. She sees a well of water, which was probably always there, but she never saw before. And she finds out that actually her son is going to be fine, that that a great nation is going to come out of him, and things are going to be okay. And that story is followed on the heels of that as our primary reading, which is the story of Akedat Yitzchak. Of course, the story where certainly we with Abraham together feel that this is it, it's over, that this heavenly command has come to Abraham. Many people talk about, Abraham is the person who questions everything, who pushes back against everything. Why, when God comes to him and says to sacrifice his only son, where is the Abraham that we know, right? Where is all the pushback? Where is all this can't be happening? Why doesn't he say no the way he said no for Sodom? I'm sorry, there's a siren outside my window. I don't know if you guys are hearing it. This question never really made that much sense to me. I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense. Of course it does. But I feel like when you read the stories of Abraham, what you find out is that this is the end of his story. It's not the beginning of his story. And from the very beginning, Abraham has been questioning and wondering, and he's been having a series of crises of faith where he says to Hashem, what's going to happen to me? When am I going to have a child? I don't know what's going to be. How could you prove it to me? And how could you do this? And how could this be true? And over again, throughout his life, God has been showing him miracle after miracle after miracle. He's been showing him prophecy after prophecy after prophecy, to the point where, when you're reading this last story, the idea that Abraham would say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at this point, after everything he's experienced, that he has doubts, or that he doesn't believe, or that he doesn't think that crazy things could happen, would actually not make sense. Abraham has lived a life where he has come to recognize the power of God in his life on a personal and on a public level. And he has come to accept with a complete faith that there is a plan, and that he might not perceive the plan, he might not understand the plan, but that it is there. So I actually always understood why Abraham takes on this journey so rapidly after his life experience, because basically his life has taught him everything's going to be okay. There is a reason for this. And ultimately, he goes through every single moment of that act with complete faith until, of course, his faith is rewarded by what I always suspect. I don't think he knew would happen, but there had to have been a part of him that knew that there was a larger plan. That's just one interpretation. I'm going to give another in a moment. But basically, Abraham believes that there's something larger that goes on in his life, and that everything could change in an instant, and that change could be enormously good and enormously positive. And that is proven correct in this final moment of his life, where he has to come to terms with the most horrifying of possibilities, and then to realize that really God is there to take care of him and to ensure the continuity of the nation of the Berit. So I think when we enter Rosh Hashanah, if we're entering it from the negative, where we say the year ahead may be filled with such devastation and such sadness and such terrible things, and I'm here to pray to God to avoid those things, I think we're entering the new year in a very negative state, a very sad state, and it doesn't really coincide with the rituals that we're being asked to participate in, which is to be, dipping the apple into the honey, and to be rejoicing and eating with family, and to be entering into a state of hopefulness and happiness. So in fact, when we're entering our Rosh Hashanah prayers, we have to be entering saying, everything could change for the good. I find that very difficult to do. I'm an eternal pessimist, not an eternal optimist. If you ever want to be put into a bad mood, you could just call me and I'll tell you all the ways that things could go wrong. I'm very good at it. So actually part of the habit I need to break around Rosh Hashanah time is to be looking towards this possibility for positivity. I want to read you something. I like to do this also before Rosh Hashanah. I randomly Google this. Why is it so hard for people to change? Like I randomly Google it frequently because I just want to see what pops up first. You can do this. I don't know what your search engine is going to show you, but mine popped up with this first article. This was the first in the search engine, and it said this. One of the number one reasons why it is so hard for people to change is because they are motivated by negative emotions. I'm going to read this to you. While it's understandable to think that strongly felt negative emotions like regret, shame, fear, and guilt should be able to catalyze lasting behavior change, the opposite is true. Negative emotions may trigger us to think about everything we're not doing or feel like we're doing wrong, but it's horrible fuel for making changes that stick. One review of 129 behavior change studies found that the consistently least effective change strategy hinged on fear and regret. As much as this sounds like a platitude, real change needs a positive platform to launch from. You need positive self-edifying reasons for taking on the challenge. Isn't that interesting? I did this an hour ago. It was just a random search. And the random search says, if the only thing fueling you is shame and guilt and fear, it doesn't say that you're not going to change. It just says that those changes don't actually stick and last. The example I could give is last night when I was sitting in my kitchen thinking about how much I would like to lose my 5 pounds that I've been talking about for 10 years. Guys, 10 years, the same 5 pounds. It hasn't changed. And I was like, I should lose weight. I can't believe I still can't do this. That's so terrible of me. I then proceeded to eat a lot of Bizet and a sticky bun and a piece of pizza. And at the time, it's not like I wasn't thinking. I'm still thinking, this is not what I should be doing. But I was in such a bad head about it, and I was feeling so down. And I had already eaten calzones for lunch, right? That negative spiral. I like to use dieting metaphors. I'm sorry, everyone. But that negative spiraling metaphor, really, it's very, very hard for us to keep in mind that it's not doing us any favors. I don't think anybody actually believes. I don't believe me when I'm saying this. I don't actually believe that my negative emotions are not fueling positive change. It's very hard for somebody to convince me of that. So for somebody to tell me, no. Just say, be kind to yourself. Say you did a good job today. Say you could do a little bit better tomorrow, right? These are very hard things to accept. That's number one. So I do believe that the number one thing that we should be thinking about going into Rosh Hashanah is that change is going to come from optimism, from positivity, from hopefulness. Those things will help us get where we want to get faster than the negative emotions, and that we actually have to believe that, and that the Torah and the rabbis and our prayers are going to help us with that. And if we pay attention to what we're praying, we'll actually see that trend. We'll see that this is really about that we should be feeling very excited and hopeful about the new year. I've been asking everybody I see this question. The question is this: do you think we celebrate Rosh Hashanah at the right time of the year? I just think it's interesting to think about. because we know that the Christians are going to have their New Year in January. No offense, but I think it's kooks galore to celebrate the New Year in the dead of winter, okay? It doesn't feel right. Nothing happens in January. If anybody has noticed, like there is actually no change in January that happens. We're all just in the midst of our year. School doesn't start then, right? But the other time is the actual New Year that we have, which is that the Jewish calendar's this is the 7th month of the year. Nobody thinks about these things. It's the 7th month. It's not the 1st month. The 1st month is in the spring. And the spring feels like an amazing time to have a new year, right? It's the spring. The flowers are coming out. Anything is possible. So I actually think it's interesting that the time that we choose for the new year, it is a time of great hope and the opening of new beginnings, but there is that little edge to it. And the edge is that we're going into winter. We're going into fall and winter. We know that that's what's ahead of us. And we know that the same way that spring is maybe almost too optimistic and hopeful. We're just like, sunshine, sunshine. It's almost summer. So I think that the Jewish calendar helps us. It puts us in this hopeful place where we don't know what's going to be. Anything could happen. And that in that balance, we have to believe and hope for something good, not just the happy, happy, joy, joy of spring. You can vote on your own. Ask your children this question. If you had to pick a time for the new year, when would you pick? But I like when we chose, okay? So we're optimistic, we're hopeful, but we're also a little bit on edge, right? We're a little bit in that state of unknown. We're not sure which direction things are going to go in. And in that state of unknown, we have to place ourselves and we have to wonder about ourselves. And here we're going to do a little bit more of that introspection work. The introspection work I like to do, number one, and I say this all the time, is I love to think about how easy it is for me to judge other people and not myself. I wish every single human being in the world would join me in this dialogue. How much fun it is to judge others, right? It's amazing. It's the best feeling in the world. Everybody's awful. You know, you walk around the street, you're like, how does she not know how angry she sounds when she's talking? How does she not know that we all think that she's too needy? How does he not know that he's too belligerent, right? No, is that just me? Don't we all make these judgment calls? Aren't we great at telling other people what they're doing wrong? I think we all secretly want to be life coaches, right? That's why we made fun of people who became life coaches. We're like, yeah, we know you're a life coach, right? But by the way, there are excellent life coaches out there. No disrespect, no disrespect. But I think all of us, to a degree, think that we could be a great life coach to someone in the world if they would ask us. Like if they would say, would you be my life coach? We'd be like, yes, and here's the list, right? I have great ideas for you. The one person we're terrible at life coaching is ourselves, because we don't really like to turn the eye on ourselves. And when we do, we usually do it the way we do it in the beginning of this class. We usually think that being our own life coach means beating ourselves up or finding all the negative aspects of ourselves, right? So the answer to this, I think, and I'm not sure because I'm still a work in progress, is to try to figure out how to be reflective about ourselves without being negative. And that's an interesting balance to hit. And I think it's the interesting balance that we're trying to find in our prayers as well, which is, how do we reflect on the year that has passed, right? Understand where things have gone right and wrong. And instead of entering into a state of negativity, thinking about, well, what small adjustments could I make in that reflective process to try to do better? Another word I think Rosh Hashana we should avoid is to use the word change. I think change is a very dangerous word. When people say, I have to change. First of all, most human beings that I know don't change. I mean, I've met people who have changed. It's true. You say, wow, they're a completely different person. But that's very unusual. Most of the time, what we're doing is we're growing. We're not changing. We're just growing. We're evolving a little, where there's dimensions of ourselves that we're getting to understand a little bit better. So when we enter into a growth mindset, we don't say, I'm awful, I'm terrible, I have to do everything differently. Instead, we reflect and we say things like, you know, I notice that I lose my temper very quickly when people are criticizing me. I guess I first of all have to admit that I'm very sensitive. Sometimes we don't like to admit things like that to ourselves. You know, I'm sensitive. It's painful when people criticize me. I don't like to be criticized. What could I do this year that instead of lashing out at them and getting very defensive, that I try to stay calm? It doesn't mean that I think they're right when that doesn't mean we should be like, here, criticize me. But I wanna stop reacting so negatively. See, now for me, when I'm using that language, I find that language doable for myself. I don't know how those of you who are listening feel, but there's something very approachable and doable for me around small adjustments to the way I react after self-reflection than saying, I'm terrible, I have such a temper, I really don't want to have a temper anymore, I want to change. If you have a short fuse, you have a short fuse. Unless you're a young person or a teenager, which by the way is why I like working with teenagers, because their brains aren't fixed until the age of like 21 to 25, we say, right? But once you're past that phase, a lot of our personalities are deeply, deeply habituated and ingrained. So we have to find a way to make it approachable for ourselves. And one way to do it is to reflect and to think about all the ways that we can make these small shifts in our reactivity and in the way we behave on a day-to-day basis. The other thing I want to encourage ourselves to do, and again, all of this is just from a reflection on the parasha, so on the Torah readings we do. So for example, we also read Yonah at this time, and Sefer Yonah is very fascinating because it's about, Yonah is the prophetic character who says, I don't want to allow evil people to have a second chance, right? And I really actually feel connected to that. You're not going to believe this. I forgot to bring it up to my class. On the back of a magazine I was reading, it was about a company called, they make bread and they do second chances. They employ criminals, people with a criminal record. They give them a second chance. They let them work in their company. And the opening phrase was, you must believe that change is possible. Like, I was like, I'm planning my Rosh Hashana class. But as I was reading it, I'm like, you know what? I don't like giving criminals a second chance. I don't want to get, they did something wrong. They deserve to be punished. And then I was thinking, imagine if I believed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought about me the way I think about people who have done something wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not easy to forgive because I think if you've done something terrible, you should pay for it. I'm like one of those weird people. Not weird. I'm okay with the death penalty. Don't tell everyone. I know it's being recorded. Everybody's gonna hear. But the idea that we apply that to other people and not to ourselves is crazy. And that's what happens for Yonah. Yonah says, how dare you give people a second chance? How dare you let these criminals do teshuvah? And actually, the lesson Yonah learns is how many second chances God gives him to fulfill his prophetic destiny. He doesn't even see the irony of the fact that God asked him to do something and he refused. And he refuses over and over. And each time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu presents him with an opportunity to try again. And he doesn't use the same generosity that he is expecting to himself towards others. Ultimately, he does, but it's such a fascinating story. You have to read it if you want to understand Rosh Hashana. And this is why I always feel, and we only have 2 more minutes, but I want to say this. I think something we should do, and actually this is not, I'm going to change the language, I think something we should do. The rabbis actually identify that the way to approach the holiday is to begin calling up people who have wronged you and finding a way to forgive them. And I think what's interesting is that when we engage in that way of trying very, very hard to make peace and forgive those that we deem, if we're already having to call them, it means we've held on to this anger for about a year, if not longer, that we're upset, that we're in a very judgmental head around them. And then the rabbis say, you know what? Can you find a way to get into peace and forgiveness? Because if you can do it to someone else, you actually will make yourself more available for God to forgive you for the things that you have done wrong, because you have. We're all together in this. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is a great person. We're all doing bad things and good things every single day. And our reluctance to even find forgiveness and find growth come from a place of feeling so negative. So when we forgive someone else, we open the door to actually believing that forgiveness is possible, because we believe it because we just did it. We forgave someone who wronged us. And that means that we believe that we too can be forgiven. Do you understand how interesting that cycle is? And they say this, by the way, as a form of couples therapy. If you're angry at your spouse or even at a child, step one is to do something nice for them. It doesn't make sense. You're angry. Why would you do something nice? And the answer is, when you start doing something kind and nice and generous for another person, it opens the space for kindness and generosity in general. And you find that you yourself then feel that you are more available for that input from others as well. So this is our time. What to reflect on for this holiday? Read the Torah readings of the story of Haggad, of the story of the Akedah, of Yonah, and all the others that are to come. Recognize that these stories are about faith and commitment, but also they're about hope and possibility, and about the idea that nothing is set in stone, that everything could be reversed, and that when we are in a state of feeling that things are hopeless, we must engage in optimism. And one of the ways we engage in optimism is by believing that forgiveness is possible, that believing that we don't have to change, but we only have to grow, and extending that growth and that forgiveness and that opportunity to those around us comes before we could hope for those things for ourselves. So I hope that we can engage in this. I plan on calling some people this week. It's going to be hard. I have to open up that door for forgiveness. And I hope that if I have wronged anyone, and I say this very, very publicly, that you forgive me, that I probably did it unintentionally. And if I did it intentionally, I hope I grow from that and never do it again. That as a community, we start taking better care of each other and finding ways to know that we are all on each other's team, and that we should love each other, and that we have to start from within and hope that it spreads to the world around us. May Hashem make this year one of blessings, that may He reverse all the negatives we've experienced and show us how to find a way towards positivity this year. And may all the world join us in this journey that the Jewish people set the tone for, of self-reflection and of development. Amen.
Amen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, yes.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Thanks, Carrie. I saw you driving over there.
Yeah, well, me and Moselle.
I love how you leave the camera on. It makes me feel somebody's listening. It's so great. Rachel Novik in Israel. How are you doing? We miss you.
Thanks. Miss you too. It's awesome here.
Call me. I'll put Zach on the phone with Solomon.
Yes. Okay. In a few minutes. Can't wait.
Bye.
Hi, Esther. Great class.
Thanks, everyone.
Great class, Esther.
Oh, hi. What's doing? Hi, Celeste.
Great. No, really awesome, amazing class.
Thank you, Celeste. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Oh, let me